Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, something a little different today. I recently sat down with my friend, my brother in justice, and our Team Justice editor extraordinaire, Peter Soby. Now, Peter is not just an accomplished video editor, he is a remarkable example of perseverance, of the power of positivity, and he is a true and shining point of light. You see, as a teenager, Peter was paralyzed in a diving accident, and he's been a quadriplegic ever since. Now in his mid-50s, I've known Peter, I've worked with Peter for years, and I really wanted him to tell his story in his own words, including what he related to me previously, which was as a teenage boy, lying in a hospital bed, struggling with the reality that he would likely be a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. He relates how he had a conversation with himself. He said, "Peter, you have always been a positive person, and you're not going to let this change you." And he hasn't. Years ago, Peter Soby reached out to me after seeing one of my early Justice Matters videos and seeing just how poor my production values were. I had no idea what I was doing, creating videos and posting them on YouTube. You've heard me say before, friends, this is not what I had on my bingo card when I retired from the Department of Justice after a career prosecutor. And this guy I didn't know, Peter Soby, reached out and said, "Glenn, I'd like to help you edit your videos. I would like to volunteer to be part of your Justice Matters mission. I don't want anything. I just want to help." And ever since then, Peter has been helping. Among other things, he will take my long, rambling, 12-minute Justice Matters videos. He will edit them down to about 60 seconds. He will manage to condense 12 minutes into a 60-second story arc that makes all the points I had hoped to make in my 12-minute video. He puts music behind it. He includes elements. He posts it on TikTok, and he helps me post it across other social media platforms. And over the years, Peter has become not only a dear friend, but he has become my brother in justice. And so I am so thrilled to be able to present this one-on-one interview, sit down, chat with my dear friend and my brother in justice, Peter Soby. All right, friends, welcome to another edition of Justice Matters One-on-One. I have a feeling this is going to be my favorite interview ever because I'm interviewing one of my favorite people on the planet. And I'm an officer of the court, so I have to tell the truth about those kind of things. This is my brother in justice. This is our Team Justice editor extraordinaire, somebody that I have worked with now for years. I don't get to see him often enough because he's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, but I see him every chance I get. So let me introduce to you my dear friend and, one of the founding members in a very real sense of Team Justice, Peter Soby.
It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to be your guest, Glenn, seriously.
And Peter knows that as soon as we're done recording this, he's going to have to edit it. So, it's we'll see how he edits his own interview. I suspect he will paint himself in the best possible light. I'm just joking. He always does. Let me take the interviewer's privilege here because One of the things he does that is extraordinary is he will take my Daily Justice Matters videos. He will boil down a 8, 12, 15-minute video to about a minute, and he will put some elements in it, put some music behind it. And what always is astonishing to me is he captures the whole arc of what it took me 8, 10, 12 minutes to say in like a minute, or sometimes a minute and a half, which is, I think, an amazing talent from my perspective. And that is how, if you ever see me on TikTok, that's courtesy of Peter, because he produces these shorts. I put them on the Blue Skies and Threads and some other platforms. He puts it on TikTok for me. And anytime you see me talking for only 60 or 90 seconds, that is Peter's editing at work. So I have always wanted to have you come on Justice Matters and tell your story, because it is beyond fascinating and emotional and uplifting, and something that I think everybody can learn something from. And so I don't want to launch into any more of an explanation than that, but I would love for you to kind of tell your backstory.
When I was 16 years old, I got a summer job at Dunkin' Donuts because I had this love for the essence of donuts. It wasn't just eating donuts. I could just have one donut a week and be satiated. I had this love for the essence of donuts. So I worked at Dunkin' Donuts on the weekends during the summer. On the weekdays, I was working at my dad's factory as a summer job. And it taught me that I don't want to be a laborer my whole life. But the donuts transcended me to levels you could never imagine, and have really made me the man that I am today. So that was just a little absurd story, Glenn, because when I was 19 years old, I dove into a lake, broke my neck, became a quadriplegic. About a year after my recovery, I was a freshman in college. It happened between freshman and sophomore year. I was going to community college. I took a year off because I was in the rehab center and the hospitals for like about 10 months. And then the following year, I went back to community college and finished my sophomore year. During that year, my high school, National Honor Society, asked me to be their keynote speaker. And this was, like a year and a half after being injured. In hindsight, the coping mechanisms, I can't imagine, like, mine were sparking 24/7, making me a completely positive person. And I honestly don't know how I did it. I can barely tell you how I coped through those first few years. But anyways, for this speech, I thought it would be hilarious to talk about donuts for 20 minutes or so. And, kind of relate that to how, it would enhance the students' lives after graduation. And they weren't all too happy about that. So the beginning of this, that's why I started my story at 16 working at Dunkin'. I wanted you to think, is he going to talk about donuts? What's going on?
I was wondering if the connection was going to come, but I also know that you're a comedian, and I mean that literally, because you played a room in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. And of course, you can't really tell, but Peter has said he's a quadriplegic, he's in a wheelchair, and he doesn't exactly do stand-up comedy. He does sit-down comedy, bum. So what I've heard you talk about before, Peter, is literally the day of your diving accident. And you said you were 19, and how old are you now? I know you're much younger than you look, but no, you're much older than you look. My apologies. How old are you now?
Yeah, now I'm 57. I'll be 58 in December. And this August was my 38-year anniversary of my accident. And a dear friend of mine who is my exact age, she's not a quadriplegic, but she had a really awful car accident when she was 19. She informed me that she calls her accident anniversary her like Happy Life Day or something. So I kind of adapted that this year because I've never seen my accident anniversary as a time of sorrow or reflection and depression or anger or what if. I've always seen it as I'm a survivor. Look at me. All these years, I still can't believe it's been 38 years. And believe you me, Glenn, it's a conscious choice to be an optimist, to be a survivor, to be a thriver, to be involved with people, to be involved with community, to speak my voice for things I believe in. And, you know, one of the biggest merits of my life on my deathbed will be that I was a member of Team Justice and that I know that I was here to be by your side, you know, and lift our voices in this time. So that is a great merit of my life, as well as, you know, just choosing to be an optimist and choosing to look forward. And it all kind of emanated from when I was in the hospital. Like back when I was first injured when I was 19, it was probably about a couple months into it. And I was wearing a halo brace, which is a metal brace that's screwed into your skull in 4 places. And, you know, so my whole life was just laying in bed with my neck completely mobilized. So you're just like laying there. You can't move. You can just move your eyeballs, basically. And at that time, I couldn't use my arms at all or anything. So nighttime, for me, wasn't the time to sleep. It was a time to contemplate. But this one particular evening, I had a conversation with myself. And it was like, hey, Peter, this is a really hard time. This is a crap sandwich. Your life is going to be extremely difficult, but you know what? You got to make yourself a promise right now. Promise yourself you're always going to look forward. Promise yourself you're not going to live a life looking back, saying, what if? You're not going to live a life looking back and being angry that you dove into that lake. You're not going to look back and be depressed because you made a stupid decision to dive into a lake. You're always going to look forward. Where's your life going to be next week? Where's your life going to be next month? Where's your life going to be in a year? Where's your life going to be in 5 years? Those are the things that you promise yourself you're going to do. And I did. I made that promise to myself. I'm always going to look forward. And then as I evolved from recovering and getting movement, especially in my left arm, and doing more for myself, evolving to pushing in a manual chair, getting out of rehab, going back to college, I then realized that the new mission in life was that you need to promise yourself that you will take this opportunity to inspire people.
So let me ask you, can I kind of have you take us through just a couple of the episodes that you've described to me that I have found so compelling and moving? And I think the first one is when you talked about what happened when you dove in that unfamiliar spot. And I think you described for me how all of a sudden you realized you were stuck kind of face down in the water.
There was this lake that was close to us, but I never swam there. But there was a dock in the middle of the lake. And I was like, let's go there and just like go to that dock and just stare up at the sky. And I wanted to just fall asleep on there. I was so tired. So I was with my buddy Ted and a couple of gals. And I ran ahead of them down the hill, stripped off all my clothes, got to the dock, ran off, dove in, and next thing I know, I'm just floating face down. And I don't know if I'm on the bottom of the lake. I don't know why I can't move. I can't figure out what's going on. And, you know, it got to the point where there were literally voices in my head, and they had a dual dialogue. And it wasn't like, you know, God, please help me. It was like, I cannot breathe. and I can't move, but I need to take a breath. I'm going to take a breath. And the other voice, no, don't take a breath. You cannot take a breath. And the other voice is like, I really want a breath so bad. No, do not breathe. The other voice is like, you know what? I think if I take a really quick breath, I can catch my breath before water comes in. Mm-hmm. And the other voice is like, no, you fool. You take one breath. Water's coming in. But I need a breath. Don't take a breath. And then suddenly my friend Ted pulled me out of the water by the waist. But before my head got out and I could breathe, he dropped me. So there was like this instant relief and then an instant dread. Like, that's it. But Ted, in hindsight, said that he felt that my body was limp. And he pulled me right back out after that. And I'm just like, don't put me back in. I can't breathe. But they said that it was probably about 3 minutes between me diving in and them getting down there. And they saw me and thought I was just doing like dead man's float. And then it was weird. And then Ted went in. But can you imagine that, holding your breath for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
No.
And then Ted pulled me to the shore. And I remember that one of the girls was like, cover him up, he's naked. And I'm like, you're worried about my penis, go call an ambulance. And so they ran up and, like, seemed like within minutes there were sirens, and I was kind of in and out of things. But then I remember a female police officer using her badge to ask me, where can you feel? And, she's like poking up my arms and my chest. And it was pretty high up. And then I remember going into shock, and that's the last thing I remember. And then, I was taken to a local hospital, and they realized that, what I needed was beyond their faculties. And then they helicoptered me to a Chicago hospital because there was also like torrential downpours for the last couple days, and there was a lot of flooding. And so I was like, are you serious? I got a helicopter ride and I don't remember it? Over the city of Chicago? That sucked, man. That was maybe worse than breaking my neck. Jeez. And so then, the next couple of weeks are really in and out because they have you on a lot of painkillers. And once again, in hindsight, my mother would tell me how that she got to the hospital that night in the city, and I was like in so much pain, but I don't remember being in pain. But, everyone told me how much I said my neck hurt. And so then they, I was on respirator for like about a week and a half. But a couple days after the injury, they took a piece of bone from my hip and stabilized the vertebrae with it and wrapped it in wire. So I permanently have like a hip bone wrapped in wire that stabilizes my neck to this day. But that's kind of like what happened on the night of the accident, and just the, you just don't know the will you have to live. And my body must have, I think, just shut down every single function so that I could just hold my breath all that time,
And then I remember you telling a story about, I think, the first question you asked a doctor. Can you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, and so I remember when, the surgery was over, and I kind of now remember things. When the doctor came in and said, gave me my situation, you're a high-level quadriplegic, you're not going to walk again, you're probably going to need a sip and puff wheelchair. And the first question I asked him was, am I going to be able to be a dad and have kids? And, he said, it's not going to be the easiest road, but it's still possible. And I just remember when I was a teenager, when I started that business, and my goal for some reason was like, I knew whether I got into DJing, baseball, or having my own business, my goal was I would be a millionaire by the time I was 25 with a wife and kids and all of that. So like that was kind of like, my mind went to like, well, I still want the wife and kids part, but so what's that about? Like, can I do that? So that was my first question.
And then you also have told me about how this was already a difficult time for your mom before your accident. And, you said something to me that is very emotional and about your concern and where your mind was at the time. So can you tell them about that?
Yeah, good memory, Glenn.
I remember your story. I've told it many times, Peter.
I feel like I'm on Hot Ones with Sean Evans when the interviewee's always like, wow, where did you get these questions?
Hmm.
But we're not eating hot wings. Maybe we should have done that. That would have been
That would have been good.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I was basically 2.5 years before my accident, my father passed away. And it was really hard on my mother. They were old school. They got married when she was 21 and he was 25. When she was 18, she lost both of her parents, and she had 6 younger siblings.
Mm.
And after she met my father, they basically kind of like brought them in and raised them as their own. And they met at a factory. They were factory workers. They were old school. My dad was born in 25. My mom was born in 30. They remember the Depression, and my mom remembers eating meals that were water with, 6 grains of rice. So anyway, when she lost my father, it was really hard. They were like that kind of old school bond, and she was just kind of like a couple years later getting back on her feet, and she got this job at a local factory working the graveyard shift. She had just started it, like maybe 2 months before my accident, and she was feeling good, getting her life going again. And then I went and had my accident, and it's like she quit her job at the factory, and now all of a sudden, like, her whole life was about her son. And after that year in the hospital and rehab, I moved back in home. That's where I lived before the accident. And so I lived there for a whole year, and she made her life helping me. And I really owe so much to her, too, about the quadriplegic I am today, because I know a lot of quadriplegics that actually have more use of their arms and wrists than I do. I can only use my left arm and my left wrist. My right arm, I can move it, but I can't do anything with the wrist. But anyways, my mom always said that the hardest thing for her was watching me struggle to do something, and she wanted to help me so bad. But she knew by helping me, I would never get more strength and independence. And like to this day, it's like, I just think to myself, if I was home for that year and she just smothered me and did every little thing for me, where would I be, Such a strong woman.
And I remember you saying that, you felt like, your mother was contending with so much because your father had passed away. And I think you said something like talking to yourself, but you were telling me about it. And now, Peter, you've gone and gotten yourself paralyzed, and that's going to be even harder on your mother when she's already contending with so much.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of actually, it's interesting, like as much as I really established a positive outlook on life and how I could be around others, that was the one thing that actually might have been a bit of a stumbling point for me, is that it did weigh on my consciousness so much, that I felt so bad that I put my mother in this position.
And what an important lesson, that we can take away from the way your mother chose to approach this. I mean, watching her son struggle to do very basic things as you were learning to live with your paralyzation, and wanting to help you, but wanting so desperately to do what was best for you, kind of pulling back and letting you develop whatever movement and abilities you could develop without her intervening and making things easier in the moment. I mean, those are life lessons that transcend, your story and our lives and everything,
Yeah, I suppose it's also a microcosm just for parenting in general, right?
Yeah.
I haven't had the good fortune of being a parent, but you with your 5 daughters and your 1 son, there's so many times in life I'm sure you can relate to that you've got to let go, let them learn their lessons, And it is not easy, but it's the best thing you can do as a parent, besides loving and taking care of your kids, of course. You know?
And so I know, kind of moving forward in the story, I think when I first got to know you, you drove your own van. I think you have since decided to have somebody else kind of drive you when you need to go somewhere. But what was that like, learning how to drive when you're a quadriplegic with only limited use of your one arm, and you don't really have much movement in that left hand, do you?
No, I mean, I can't move the fingers at all. I could just lift the wrist up. That's it.
And so how did you go about learning to drive?
Yeah, so basically the first thing I had to learn was to do everything left-handed because I was right-handed. And basically I broke my spinal cord on an angle. So the right side, I'm a little higher paralyzed than my left side. So it's one of those things where if I would have broken it even and had as much strength on my right as my left, I would have been a lot stronger. But had I broke it on my left like my right, I would have been a lot more debilitated. But so I had to learn to do everything left-handed, eat, write, everything. And so then, yeah, it came to driving. I guess first I should even back up. Like, I was told I would always need a power chair. When I left the hospital, my big fight, even months before I left, was like, I want a manual wheelchair. Like, no, you need a power chair. Like, I'm leaving this hospital in a manual wheelchair. And I did. And like in the beginning, like my wheelchair had like pegs on the wheels, so I could just use my palms to push it. In the beginning, I could almost just push in a circle because my left hand was so much stronger, my left arm. But I was like pushing. They were like, see, you can't even push straight. I'm like, yeah, but I'm pushing. And it was literally, it's the story. Like, like I'll push 1 inch today and 10 inches tomorrow. And that 10 inches will turn into 100 inches. And that's what I did. And it helped me gain strength too. And I don't knock anyone who uses a power chair. It makes your life so much easier. So much easier. But I just wanted to sit in a manual chair. I wanted to push myself, and it made me stronger. And that strength, I think, led to, I roll my wheelchair, there's no car seat, rolled my chair right into the driver's area. There was a lockdown mechanism. The steering wheel had this 3-prong thing I stuck my left hand in, and then there was a pole with 3 prongs that I just kind of wedged my right hand into, and I would push it for the brake and pull it for gas. And so I would drive like that. I feel the hit on my independence, but I've got another new van that I can't drive, but I could hire drivers or friends could drive. And I spent 30 years driving, and it was great.
And one thing I can say is you get out and about a lot. I know that because so often you're like, well, I'm going to the Rams game, or I'm going to the movies, or, you're going to the theater or going to see a concert. And I think you and I have a deep, abiding love for a lot of the same music, particularly from the 70s. I am a music junkie. And the other thing that I know you do a good bit of is talking with audiences about the dangers of diving in unfamiliar places.
Yeah, that's one thing. I've been really fortunate that I was actually a speech communications major in college. How funny that I would fumble on the word speech. As I say, I'm a speech communication major. But anyway, my big goal was a couple of years after the accident, living in Chicagoland, the winters were hellacious. And even after I started driving, I can't just go scrape off my windows from ice and snow. I would have to get in the van, which usually would be hard because I'd have to make it through snow to get on my ramp. Then I'd get in my van and start the engine, and I have to wait about 20 minutes for the defroster to melt all the ice and snow off my windows. And my goal was to go somewhere warm. And I decided that California was my goal. Nobody believed me. I think even my mom didn't think, like, how are you going to drive and start a life across the country? But she always supported me, but it was like, what? And then 2 months after I graduated in June, and I drove to Los Angeles in August of 1991. And that's another thing I just think about, like, how? And there was no internet. Like, I need caregivers every morning and night. I got to California, and my sister took the trip as well to help me out. And one of my good friends, Steve, also was moving. So he was driving his car and I had my van and I was pulling like a big U-Haul. And there was like these windy parts when you get through like New Mexico and Arizona. And I've just like got my left arm holding that wheel and the wind is blowing this U-Haul trailer and oh my gosh. But anyway, in hindsight, like how the frick did I move across the country? And I still like right now if someone said, yeah, you got to move to Chicago, I'd be like, F you. Like what? But kind of when you're young, you do it.
Yeah.
So once I got to Los Angeles, I was really lucky and started working in the entertainment industry. And circling all the way back to your question, Glenn, talk about long-winded answers. I thought you were the king, Glenn. I think I'm the prince.
I don't know. I'm pretty darn good at being long-winded.
So I got in with this group that basically spoke to middle schools and high schools about the dangers of diving into water, just making good choices in life, and just like a disability awareness. Throughout the years, I've continued to be fortunate to speak to schools. And in 2015, I started mouth painting, which is a whole nother story. But now, like, I also do mouth painting demonstrations. And like, I'll go to like elementary schools. I'll give the kids like a motivational speech, and then I'll show them how I actually mouth paint. Then afterwards, they'll go up to an art room, the kids that want to do it, and they all try mouth painting. It's so adorable.
And you're actually the author and illustrator of several or multiple books, right? And I know you work as part of the, was it Foot and Mouth Painters Association? Is that right?
Yeah, the MFPA, the Mouth and Feet Painting Artists.
Artists, yeah. And how many books have you published and illustrated?
Actually, it's only been one so far, Muffin's Fun and Curious Christmas. And the second one is Muffin and Mac Travel the World. And it's like Muffin is this cat character, and Mac is this little mouse, and they go to all the famous sites around the world. But that one, even though it's been finished for 2 years now, is not coming out until October of 2026.
Can you just tell our Team Justice folks how it is that you and I first kind of came to know each other and started working together?
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. Maybe it was 2020. Maybe it was in the beginning of the pandemic. Anyway, thank goodness the YouTube algorithm brought me one of your videos. And of course, I was immediately blown away, enthralled by how your messaging, how you spoke, your passion. You were saying what we were all feeling, and it really resonated. However, every time I would watch your video every day, I'd be like, man, that intro is so janky, man. It's like for such like a 30-year seasoned professional, we got to sit through that opening.
Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here.
And so I literally just, went to, your About Me section or something on YouTube and emailed you and said, listen, I love what you're doing, everything about you. But that opening, your intro. And of course, I felt awful. You're like, oh, my son made it for me. And, he doesn't know a lot, but he made me this intro. I'm like, oh, shit. Sorry, Glenn. Sorry that I just called your son's intros janky. But that being said, you were also very gracious, and you're like, hey, I am open, man. Just put something together and let's see what you do.
And that started a beautiful relationship, both professional and personal. And so, you've been doing this Team Justice editing work for probably going on 5 years now. Then, I remember the first time we met in person. We had been talking and working together for quite some time. I am out on the West Coast, I think most often when I'm part of Stephanie Miller's road show, where I know you're a Stephanie Miller fan. I have been a Stephanie Miller fan for years. I have the good fortune of being able to join her on tour and go to several cities around the country. And I remember meeting you for the first time, Peter. I remember it vividly. I was in Santa Monica. and we had arranged to have dinner, or we were having some of the Team Justice folks, I think, come to Shutters, where my wife and I were staying. And, obviously that I knew you. I think you were still, no, I don't remember if you were driving your van or if you got a ride, but what I do remember is there is a little kind of winding street that goes from where the cars stop down to where the entrance to the hotel restaurant is. And here comes Peter, like he's Mario Andretti with his wheelchair, like pushing himself down this. And it's like the way you're able to get around, with the speed with which you're able to get around and maneuver like a bandit in that wheelchair, given your limited range of mobility. It just struck me. It's like, okay, that's amazing. And I do know on the back of your wheelchair, I don't think you put much in the way of like stickers or insignia on, but I do remember you letting me place a Justice Matters sticker on the back of your wheelchair.
Yep, it's back there.
So I'm going to give you some editing advice. Maybe you can cut in some elements of pictures of you and I together in the few times we've gotten to spend some time, and we can kind of show the folks that. So, I could go on and ask you questions about your life for hours, but let me do this. Let me ask the question that we always ask toward the end of these interviews, as you know, because you edit my interviews. Where can people find you and your work other than, all of your editing work on my shorts, the nuggets, and so much of the work that I do?
Thanks, Glenn, for giving me the honor of sharing my reachability and my footprint on the internet and this world. People can basically find me. I've got a website, petersoby.com. And other than that, I'm mostly on Instagram at Donut Spirit. Oh, look how we've come all the way back around.
There's the callback. There you go.
Yep. And yeah, I'm on the usual Facebook. I did leave Twitter during Elon Musk, but I am on Blue Sky. And so basically though, if you went to petersoby.com, there'll be links to everything. You'll get to see my paintings there. You'll get to see a little bit also about my history with this cult classic film called Carnival of Souls, which is a whole nother story, but I've got the great merit of owning this cult classic film, and we've done a digital remaster, revived it with the Criterion Collection, where it enjoys a great home there right now. And of course, the painting is with the MFPA, the Mouth and Feet Painting Artists. And you could find me, and they're a great organization to support, at mfpausa.com, even though they are a worldwide organization, but I belong to the USA branch. And, it's just a merit for me to be the Team Justice editor. I am working on a new screenplay because my background is producing films and writing screenplays. And of course, who knows what I'll do with my burgeoning stand-up comedy career. And then, I continue to be a mouth painter, and most proudly a justice warrior.
You are a justice warrior, Peter. And I couldn't be more honored to have you both as our Team Justice editor and as my friend and brother in justice. Maybe we should do a part 2 or part 3, make these, sort of frequent videos, because there's a lot more to talk about, with respect to your life, your challenges, how you've overcome them and how you've remained positive. I'll never forget the first time you told me the story about when you had that conversation with yourself. I think you were still in the hospital bed. And as you related it to me, you told yourself, Peter, you've always been a positive person and you are not going to let this change you. And you've lived that promise to yourself, and that is a remarkable and inspirational thing. So thank you for everything you do. Thank you for sitting down for this interview. Sitting down, I guess, can we make a joke out of that? And can I leave you with the one joke that I think I had when you told me you were going to go to Las Vegas and appear for the first time, even though you'd done some comedy before. And I think I said, I would say break a leg, but that's probably not the right thing to tell you, right?
Yeah, break a leg would put me in the same position I am now.
There you go.
And thank you for joining me and asking me for this interview and being so polite to sit with me during the interview. You could have been a total jag-off and been like, I'm standing up for this interview, but you sat down the whole time with me. Thank you, Glenn.
I did. All right, Peter. I know we will be talking again soon, probably as soon as tomorrow. So have a good night, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Glenn.